Hello and welcome to Long Island University Pratt Recreation Center for the matchup between the Long Island University Sharks and the Quinnipiac Bobcats. In the NCATA preseason coaches poll, the Sharks were ranked number 14 and the Bobcats were ranked number 2. My name is Emily Funk and I'm joined by Ashley Falgren. The Sharks are coached by head coach Shelby Armstrong, assistant coach Nicolette Tianga, and volunteer assistant coach Elizabeth Markley. The Bobcats are head coached by Mary Ann Powers, assistant coach by Chloe White, Tiffany Ziba, and volunteer assistant coach Melanie Mancini. And we are already headed into the first round compulsory acro.
Talking a little bit about the compulsory event, right now we have the compulsory acro heat going. And in the compulsories, each team competes identical predetermined set of skills with a predetermined star value of 10.0. There are 4 heats that include acro, pyramid, toss, and tumbling. Each heat can score up to a perfect 10 with the total combined event score of 40 points. Compulsory skills are considered to be the building blocks of acrobatics and tumbling and reviewed by the committee every 3 years. And that was a really great compulsory acro for the Quinnipiac Bobcats to start off the meet with.
And in just a couple of moments, the Sharks will take the mat. And as Ashley mentioned, they will be doing the same round, really working to nail the technique.
And something the judges really look for in these compulsory events is, as I mentioned, these are the building blocks of the rest of the competition. So these are pretty much the most basic of the elite skills that you will see. And they kind of translate into the further events as we go along with the acro event, pyramid event, toss event, and the tumbling event. So again, you'll be seeing identical skills all out of a 10.0 between both of the teams today.
And Ashley, since these are the building blocks of the sport and everyone has the same start value, what are some things that these athletes should be attempting to do to try to get that perfect score?
Yes, the judges are looking for super clean form, and by that you're going to want to see legs glued together on certain skills. You're going to want to see lots of height when the tops, which are the person on top, and then the bases having a full extension in everything that they do. You're going to want to see a lack of steps, stability in the bases, meaning little to no movement under them. And basically, if you think it looks aesthetic, that is what you're looking for. As well as cleanliness, as you can see, there are 2 groups out on the mat, and they need to look identical to each other. There can be deductions for a lack of synchronization. So as you can see here with Long Island, they are looking very synced up. They do the exact same skills at the exact same time, and anything that may look slightly different is going to be a deduction. And that was super clean for the Sharks. Something you might note as well is there was a counter at the back of the mat, and this person, all their job is to count those skills out. That way both groups know exactly when to hit their skills, and they are not actually completing the skills, as you can see, but just allowed to be out there at no deduction at all, just to help them hear when they're supposed to hit their skills.
And we will see some events today and some heats where the teams do not utilize a counter. I believe it's totally up to the team's discretion. Obviously, it can be very helpful when you have multiple groups out on the mat to ensure that they're synced up.
Yes.
But it is not required.
And the next event, or the next heat we will go into in the compulsory event, is the pyramid event. And this one you are going to see lots of bodies being stacked. It's basically it can be up to 3 layers. For the compulsory, it is just a 2-layer pyramid. And they are going to be hitting a straddle position at the top, and they will be flipping off of their mid-level base into 2 bases that are standing on the ground. And so here come the Bobcats for the compulsory pyramid. Super awesome job for the Bobcats there. Some notes to comment on from the pyramid. As you can see, we have the top, who's there doing a straddle hold. That straddle hold is going to be something where your legs are above the 90 degrees and they stay there the entirety of the counts before they flip off into the bases on the ground. And those bases, their goal is to have a super strong catch where they are not letting their arms drop below the horizontal and their elbows are staying at a perfect 90 degree. Those tops feet are not dropping below the base's arms.
So although these heats all have the start value of 10, with everything that you're saying, all these little technical, the legs, the catches, the absorb technique, there's a lot of opportunity to kind of lose bits and pieces along the way.
Yes.
Is it often that we could see a perfect score in this round?
There's definitely potential for a perfect score. I think the 2 most common heats in this event are the compulsory pyramid and the compulsory toss that you will see a 10-0 score out of. I think you have opportunities for the least amount of deductions if you can really execute to the best of the ability. But I think most commonly the compulsory toss is something that you can definitely score a 10 in that I've seen. Sharks did really good with that compulsory pyramid. Something you may have seen on the right is on the group on the right, on their catch, there's a deduction known as slight deviation on catch. That is something that you may know in further events when the top is coming down from a pyramid or a toss. You're going to want to make sure that those tops, feet, and bodies are directly lined up in front without going diagonal in any sense. So there may be a little bit of lack of deviation on that catch for that one group, but other than that, I think that compulsory pyramid was really awesome for them. Going into the compulsory toss, as I was saying, this is an event that can, it's very doable to get a 10.0 score on. This is going to be with 4 bases on the bottom on the ground and 1 top on top of them. And they are going to throw her up into the air as she does a tuck toss. And she will be in a nice tight tuck position. And then her goal is to kick out at a 45-degree angle. If you're imagining a clock and going around at the 45 is when she should kick out straight legs, and she'll sweep through into her base's arms. And again, looking for a nice tight catch by those bases with little to no movement, keeping those arms at a 90-degree angle.
And that back tuck is definitely one of the, as you mentioned, more basic of the skills that we'll see in of tosses today. So definitely want to make sure it's very precise and clean.
Team is super happy with that compulsory toss. So you can see there was a lot of explosion from those bases out there. The toss went super high, and that is definitely a great toss that you want to see. And we're going to be looking for the same thing from Long Island.
In compulsory toss, what we just saw, we saw 2 groups taking the mat. When we get to event 4 later, where we go back into tosses, there will be another synchronization heat where the groups will have 2 groups on the mat again, syncing up with that same skill. Likely that it will be a higher level skill that they will be completing. But just as important to keep the synchronization, the technique, the cleanliness, all of the things that we're looking for in the compulsory round in the other rounds that we'll see tonight.
Yes. And here come the Sharks out for their compulsory toss.
Another great heat from the Sharks. It seems like both teams are really starting today with a bang. Great synchronization that's happening. Lots of tight precision that we're seeing as these skills are being completed. Both teams look very happy with what they've done so far.
Yes, definitely. And this compulsory event is, because it is the first event of the meet, it can be super high pressure because as these skills are so basic, it's really easy, or it can be really easy to get these points at the beginning of the meet while they're nice and basic. But again, it's also easy to mess these up and cause a lot of nerves for the rest of the meet. So it kind of sets the tone how you tackle these compulsory events. And as being an athlete in this sport, you definitely feel the pressure in starting with compulsory acro, going all the way through compulsory tumbling. And now we'll have 8 athletes out on the mat for the compulsory tumbling heat. You're going to be looking for sticking feet to the ground, no movement or extra steps, keeping their feet together and legs nice and straight. Awesome compulsory tumbling for the Bobcats. I think for Quinnipiac, tumbling and cleanliness is definitely something, one of their strong suits in terms of the competition. They've got their feet glued together and toes pointed, everything the judges are looking for in compulsory tumbling.
They were definitely very clean, sticking those landings very tight. Something that we want to note here is during compulsory tumbling, both teams, again, are doing the same skills. You might see a little bit of a difference with their arm placement, like going into jumps or how they might choose to land their tumbling. That does not impact their score. It is just preference. Some teams prefer to land their tumbling clean. Some will land with their arms out by their sides, or their counts might be slightly different, but that will not impact their score. Just team preference, and I know from watching the sport the past couple of years, teams will change up what they do all the time just based on who they have taking the mat and what looks best for them in that moment.
Yep, 100%. I know in my time as an athlete, the way we stuck our landings changed even throughout the years for me. So definitely somewhere you will see some change between teams as we go through the meet. And Long Island, they will be concluding the compulsory event with their compulsory tumbling right now, right before we head into the acro event after we receive those scores.
We will get scores from each round as they go heading into halftime. At the tail end of halftime, we will get the scores from our third event, the pyramid event.
That was an awesome way to conclude the compulsory event for the Sharks right there. Minimal steps, but I thought that was fairly clean and a great way to start the meet.
Yes, definitely both teams had a great showing in the compulsory event. Both were very tight, had some great synchronization going on. Definitely gets you excited for the rest of the meet to see how they can bring their technique into these higher level skills that they will be executing.
Yes, and our next event is going to be the acro event. So the acro event, teams compete in 3 different heats of 5, 6, and 7 elements. The 6 element heat is synchronized with 2 groups. Groups of 2 to 4 athletes will compete acrobatic lifts and tosses, demonstrating strength, balance, and technique from both the bases and tops. Each heat may score up to a perfect 10 with a total combined score in this event up to 30 points. It's also important to note that in the acro event, it is possible to not have your specific heat start out of a 10. So once we get into these more elite events, they can decrease the start value if you do not have enough of those higher level skills. Long Island and Quinnipiac today will have all of their start values out of a 10, but maybe further into the meet we will see some of those decrease, specifically in the toss and tumbling events.
Execution is clearly very important in this sport, so sometimes that's the smarter decision from the coaches to maybe perform a skill that might not be a perfect 10, might be a couple tenths of a point below that in order to have a better execution on a skill. And being that it's only February, there's definitely opportunity throughout the season for skills to be changed and to be upgraded as the teams are kind of just finding their footing. Most schools at this point have only had a handful of opportunities to compete. So we just got our first scores back from the compulsory event. In the acro event of acro heat of compulsory, Quinnipiac scored a 9.2 and Long Island University scored a 8.6. In the pyramid heat, Quinnipiac scored a 9.6, LIU scored a 9.3. In the toss heat, Quinnipiac scored a 9.8, LIU scored a 9.4. And tumbling, Quinnipiac scored a 8.8 and LIU scored a 8.0.
And Quinnipiac is now taking the mat for their 5-element acro. Awesome job to start out the acro event right there. As you can see, they have a lot of different holds in the acro event. So anything that they switch positions, so we saw a what they call a walk into extension. When the base was holding the top above her head, that's going to be a hold that you have to have for 3 seconds, or that will be a deduction from the judges, so which would be called a lack of hold. So on anything that they do, you saw the handstand that she did at the end of that, where she held for 3 seconds, as well as the press down into the pike hold must be held for 3 seconds. And I think that was executed really well for the Bobcats.
And coming back to scores, as we do some manual math up here, Quinnipiac scored a 37.4 in the compulsory event, and Long Island University scored a 35.3. So off to a great start for both teams, with a little bit over a 2-point difference.
Now we have Long Island out here for their 5-element. That was a very impressive 5-element acro for the Sharks right there. Something else to note is they have 45 seconds to complete these heats. So that clock in the back that you can see is a timer, and that is how long they have to complete their event. But as you saw, that top, she started from a press hold, pressed up to her handstand, came back down, and then went back up. So she had 2 handstands held in that 5-element acro, which actually completed the requirements they needed in just that skill. So that was pretty impressive for the Sharks right there. Also, this is Long Island's 2nd year as a program in the NCATA. Quinnipiac is in one of the originating teams of this sport, with Marianne Powers as one of the founders of the sport, actually. So this is a really fun matchup today, as we have 2 D1 teams with varying lengths of experience, and yet they're still pretty comparable out on the mat.
Definitely, and as you mentioned, Marianne Powers is one of the founding members of the sport, and head coach Shelby Armstrong from LIU is actually very good at building programs. This is the 3rd program that she's built in the past couple of years. She is doing a great thing for the sport, starting these programs, and as we can tell, she's very talented at it. Her team's doing a great job so far today.
Yes. Now we have the 6-element acro for Quinnipiac, and we have this is the synchronized heat here. Another super impressive acro event right there. In that 6-element, as you can see, they had to have 2 groups doing the same thing, and they basically did what LIU just had for their 5-element, where they had a press to handstand, coming back down to that pike hold, and then back up to a handstand, and they added another acrobatic gymnastics movement there, where they went into an arch hold, those tops at the top, which is actually fairly new to this sport. We're seeing a lot more of, but it's definitely something that comes from acrobatic gymnastics, expanding, I guess, the variations of this sport.
Definitely a difficult round to execute on your own, and then having to sync those up. Very impressive.
Yeah, and making that 6-element acro a synchronized heat is actually something that has just came to be this past year. So this is only the second year that you've had to synchronize this heat, which makes it a lot more difficult, as you're going to need to see a lot more variety of talent in these athletes to form 2 groups of a 6-element heat that starts at a 10.0.
Definitely a little bit of struggle from both groups, each in different parts, but a good recovery from both groups to continue to end up completing that round and keeping it under the 45 seconds. As we add more skills into these acro rounds, the time doesn't change. You don't have more time to execute the different elements. So as we just completed the 6-element round, still 45 seconds, and as we head into the final round of acro, it is still 45 seconds.
So what we might have seen there from that group on the right is maybe a slight lack of stability from the base, which caused some jolting for the top on top. So, and that could have been from the top, it could have been from the base, either way. This is a very team-built sport, and everyone has to do their job in order to make those skills hit, which brings the difficulty level. And then they were able to pull that together. And then I think the group on the left just got a little bit shaken up and came down a little bit early out of that handstand. But overall, I feel like it wasn't too bad, and they'll be able to pull it.
Some really high-level skills, but in different ways. Our Quinnipiac and Long Island University will choose to do these skills in different areas.
Yeah, a lot of variation that we'll be able to see through the rest of the meet, which makes it so exciting once we get out of those compulsory events.
And these are skills that we can see later when we have the team event, which we'll talk a little bit about later, where everything that you're seeing now and you'll see throughout the duration of the meet will be put together. We have 5th-year Mia Rose King. She's the top in this heat. She's very talented, and I know that they are sad to see her graduate, but she definitely has a lot of flexibility, and her strength is acro.
Yes, I've definitely seen a lot of handstands from Mia Rose throughout the years. She is someone highly valued by Quinnipiac, and she's a very consistent player for them. So it's always good to see her out on the mat, and glad to see she decided to take her 5th year this year.
As we mentioned before, Long Island University, it's a growing program. They're in their 2nd year. Next year, they already have a class of 28 freshmen joining the program, which is absolutely incredible, and especially a great feat that they were already ranked number 14 in the preseason poll by the coaches for the NCATA. They have a really bright future, and it's great to see that the sport is growing, and that just here at one school they already have 28 freshmen committing to the next season.
Yeah, the growth of this sport is really expanding. We're seeing a lot more D1 schools opening up, a lot of new coaches opening these programs and getting started to get more athletes opportunities.
And some more schools in the Northeast, which I know is very exciting.
Yes.
And our top in this heat is Christina DiVincenzo. She's a sophomore from Long Island. She competes in a lot of events. We will continuously see her throughout the competition today. She competes in compulsories, acro event, pyramid event, tosses, 2 tumbling events, and is a huge asset to the team event. She does, in the coach's words, everything, and she's a top, so definitely someone to keep an eye out for today. And she just had a great showing in acro 7.
Yeah. And same with Maddie Bradley, who you just saw basing out there. She is one of the strongest bases for Long Island. She's a senior who transferred from the LIU gymnastics team, actually, to the acro team. And she was in almost every acro event, along as being a bridge, a base, catcher, etc. So really good to see her out there. And that actually just wrapped up the acro event for us, and we are going to head into the pyramid event next. In the pyramid event, teams compete in 3 individual heats building pyramids of 3 layers. So teams combine an entry structure and dismount to create a pyramid. Each heat has a different requirement: inverted body position for the top, synchronized, and open. Each heat may score up to a perfect 10 with a total combined score in this event up to 30 points. And today, both teams will have a total score of 30 points, maximizing their start values there. We are just waiting for the scores for those acro events, and we will let you know those in just a moment. Here we have Quinnipiac taking the mat for their inversion pyramid, and we will be back with you for the scores right after this heat. Awesome job there for that inversion heat. So you can see that was a handstand pyramid. Mia rose on top, and you saw a lot of stability from the bases there. And that mid-level base who was holding the handstand is actually standing on 2 thighs of those bottom bases. So it takes a lot of core strength to do that mid-leveling position, as well as those bases that are catching the top from the handstand also takes a lot of strength right there.
And while we wait for Long Island University to take the mat for their first pyramid heat, the scores from the acro round for the 5-element acro heat: Quinnipiac scored a 9.6, LIU scored a 9.3. The 6-element synchronization heat, Quinnipiac scored a 9.1, LIU scored a 5.8. And in the 7-element, Quinnipiac scored a 9.4, LIU scored a 9.15, bringing the event totals to Quinnipiac 28.1, LIU 24.25.
A great inversion pyramid from the Sharks. As you can see, that was actually the same pyramid that Quinnipiac did right before that. So as we said, these events can have some variation, but we'll also see some of the same things. As these pyramids, there is not as much variety that you can do compared to the acro events. The acro events you can kind of build from the ground up, picking and choosing different elements you want to add, whereas the pyramid event takes a lot of people, so you don't have as many options there. Also, our meet totals so far, I'm going to mention Quinnipiac with a 65.5 total and LIU with a 59.55 total.
So we did see in the 6-element synchronization heat, as Ashley had mentioned, we had a couple deductions that were taken off from the issues that we saw from Long Island University, but we're still seeing scores not too far off from each other. We're going to see a lot of advanced skills today, which leave room for some error. So definitely, although they took a hit on that score, getting a 5.8 in the 6-element heat for the acro round, there's definitely a lot of areas throughout the rest of the competition today to regain some points.
Yes. I like to say, I think a lot of people have seen in this sport that it really all comes down to the team event. Teams can be neck and neck the whole meet, or one team can be very far ahead. But once we have that last event, which actually has a possible total of over 100 points, a lot can go wrong and a lot can go right in that 2.5 minutes. So even though the Sharks may be behind, there's plenty of time for them to get closer in score throughout the rest of the meet. And next we will have the synchronized pyramid from Quinnipiac. So there's going to be 2 identical pyramids out there, just like we saw in the 6-element acro in the acro event.
So like this, not only are you looking to execute the skills perfectly, but you also need to have them synchronized between the 2 groups. Seeing some really great synchronization heats from Quinnipiac today and what they've executed so far. You can tell on the sideline with the clapping that they're doing and the repeating of the counts that they've probably practiced this a lot to get that timing correct.
Yeah, Quinnipiac is out here today looking super clean, as they have been all season so far. So it's looking like it's going to be a good year for them.
Definitely exciting with their rank of number 2 in the preseason poll, the coaches poll. I believe that's the first time that they've been ranked that high in the poll, definitely that high in a while. So yes. I know there was a lot of excitement around that.
We'll welcome the Sharks to the mat for their synchronized pyramid heat.
Again, a very similar heat utilizing the back ends. And as we've talked about a little bit today, kind of with how the teams choose to execute, we saw that Quinnipiac decided to go directly horizontal, facing the side for their bridges, and Long Island University decided to do a diagonal. Again, that's not something that will impact the score. It is the team preference and can help to showcase different things depending on what positions the top is hitting, or just trying to highlight some of your team's strengths in different areas.
Yeah, and those bridge pyramids are very common, something you may see a lot more of in the final team event, as it is something that requires less people compared to those thigh stand pyramids. In the thigh stands, you'll have 2 bottom bases, whereas the bridge pyramid, you are just using the 1 person. And our last event for the pyramid event, or last heat, is going to be the open heat. So there's a lot more variation you might be able to see. There's less restriction in this heat, so it'll be interesting to see what we see right now.
Definitely hoping to see some creativity and just see the teams showcase their strengths. The Bobcats are definitely very happy with their open pyramid. Something that Ashley had mentioned earlier is we will see some pyramids throughout the day that might have 2 layers or 3 layers that clearly have 3 layers, with the top being fully extended by the mid base.
Yeah. As you can see, that was, if you could catch that mid-level will actually push press that top up with no one in the back assisting. So that is a very difficult thing to do while you're standing on 2 people as well. So that is going to take a lot of strength from that mid-level, which really showcases how much these athletes are training outside of just practice and in the weight room as well. And LIU is going to conclude this event with their open pyramid heat. That was a super clean pyramid and way to end up those pyramid events. As you can see, that was actually the same pyramid other than the entry. So for LIU, they actually did a toss up to the mid-level's hands, which actually I think causes a little bit more risk, as that is I guess less stability in a way for that top, as she is having to fight that momentum on her way up. And they were able to execute that really well. So now we are actually going to go into the halftime, 15-minute break right now, and we will be back with the scores in about 15 minutes. Oh, thank you.
And we are heading back from halftime. The teams are continuing to warm up for the second half of today's meet, but we are back with some scores from our pyramid round. In the inversion pyramid, Quinnipiac scored a 9.4, LIU scored a 9.1. In the synchronized pyramid, Quinnipiac scored a 9.55, LIU scored a 9.15. And in the open pyramid, Quinnipiac scored a 9.65, LIU scored a 9.5, bringing the event totals to Quinnipiac 28.6 and LIU 27.75. So very neck and neck in this event from Quinnipiac and Long Island University.
Yeah, definitely. And as we are going into the second half of the meet, this is going to be a lot more fast-paced. So we have the toss event, which we are going to start out with, then the tumbling heat, and then the team event. So for the toss event is an aerial event with a group of bases tossing one top in the air. The top completes a flipping and or twisting skill forward or backward. 2 of the 3 heats are solo tosses with 1 synchronized heat like the other events, and each heat may score up to a perfect 10 with a total combined score of up to 30 points. Here Quinnipiac is actually starting out with a 9.9 with an Arabian double full. That was really impressive and a great way to start out the toss event right there. And like we said, so the toss event is something that is more difficult to start at a 10.0 just with difficulty. So for Quinnipiac, we will see all 3 of their tosses starting out of a 9.0. And for LIU, their first toss is going to be starting out at a 9.30. So we'll definitely see some slight differences in difficulty between the teams. Again, LIU being just a second-year team, and Quinnipiac being one of the originating ones, being around for a lot longer.
So with Quinnipiac start values of 9.9, they're choosing a skill a little bit lower to try to have that better execution, and we just saw some great execution. Something of note is this sport brings together a lot of athletes with different backgrounds, coming from acrobatic gymnastics, cheerleading, even some diving. And I wanted to mention that as the top that we just saw there, Avery Malik, she has a cheerleading and a diving background, which a lot of tops actually have that diving experience, and you can see that in the way that they execute these high-level tosses. They are very, very clean and precise.
Awesome job for the Sharks right there. So as I said before, their toss is starting out of a 9.30. And those actually were the same foundation for both teams for that toss. So we saw an Arabian pull-through from Long Island. And the difference between Quinnipiac is Quinnipiac just added another twist in there that gave them the 9.90 start value. And to upgrade that toss even more, you might be wondering how that could become a 10.0. The top would just have to straighten her legs and make that a piked Arabian double. And that would give her that extra 10th. But like Emily was saying, it's definitely smarter to do the skill that you can better execute than do something that you cannot do as well. And then like the other events, for our second heat of this event, it is going to be synchronized. So we are going to have 2 groups out on the floor for this one, also starting at a 9.90.
As we've mentioned during today's matchup, the synchronized event obviously is a great visual, having 2 groups doing the same exact skill, and creates a little bit more of a challenge with having to time them up. But Ashley's mentioned today that, of course, 2 groups requires more people, so it is a challenge and something to really help build up your team by having 2 groups with full groups each having to execute these skills.
And something the judges are going to be looking for in these tosses, you're going to want to look for the height coming from the base's toss, seeing how high those tops can go, and seeing a full extension of that toss from those bases. They look really happy with that toss right there.
Definitely a lot of excitement from the Bobcats, as they should be. That was a beautifully executed toss from both groups. Some great synchronization going on there, and really bringing that technique that we've talked about today into all areas of the toss, from the beginning to the catch.
And if you noticed, those tosses actually face the front, whereas their first toss faced the side. And like we talked about before, that is totally up to the coaches and the team's preference. Sometimes, depending on what kind of toss you're doing, it can highlight different areas where, whether that's the shape of the toss, making sure if you want to see a pike through or not a pike through coming through in that catch. And so that 9.90 start value toss was going to be a double twist, and they executed that pretty well. And Long Island's going to come out next with their start value of a 9.40. Awesome job there for the Sharks. I think we might have seen a little bit lack of stability on the catch on the left group out there. Other than that, I think that was a really great toss. And then again, that was just a more simplified version of what Quinnipiac did. So instead of doing 2 twists, they just did 1, which is the reason for the decrease in the start value in comparison.
We saw a great sync once again from the 2 groups from Long Island. And doing that simplified skill, I imagine, really helped their execution because they did execute it very well, besides that little bit of a step on the left. Great timing, similar height from both groups. Good showing in the synchronized toss heat.
And again, that is something that that stability of the bases is also something the judges are looking for. They want to see no movement from those 4 bottom bases on the catch of that toss. And now this is the final heat of the toss event. This is the open heat, which is going to be starting at a 9.90 as well.
The Bobcats seem thrilled with the toss that they just did. That was the same toss that we saw in their synchronized heat, but with just the 1 group at great height. Very, very clean.
Yeah, I think that was a great toss event for the Bobcats. Coaches and athletes look super happy about that.
This definitely, as we mentioned, is a little bit more rapid fire as we head into the second half, considering we have 1 more toss to go from Long Island before the end of this event. Then we head into the tumbling event, which we see 6 heats, and then we're straight on to the team event. And as I'd mentioned before, with the different backgrounds of the athletes that we see today, we actually get a performance from a local youth acrobatics and tumbling group, which is very exciting. Again, talking about the growth of the sport, to see the sport being brought to the communities and having what we're doing today at the youth level. Same method from Long Island there with what Quinnipiac did. They took the toss that they did from their sync round and they performed it for their open toss, which is a great method and totally something that you're allowed to do. And if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yes, exactly. I think that's a pretty common method that teams like to use, is you can just train the same groups and you can really nail the execution of those tosses and make the most of your athletes in that sense without trying to build anything else super new if you don't have to. But like we said, this event does move, or the second half does move extremely fast. I think this second half of the meet is one where the athletes are more hyped up, more excited. It's a more powerful half of the meet, as you're seeing a lot of explosive tumbling, a lot of explosive tosses, and same thing with the team event. Everything is moving super fast, and these athletes have to be super dialed in and fired up to get through these last few things.
During the 15-minute halftime, the teams were able to warm up their skills for the second half. But as we prepare for the next event, the tumbling event, the teams are still getting ready for this team event, as it is literally jam-packed with skills. We're going to see skills that we've seen all day today with tosses, tumbling, pyramids, acro. So lots to warm up.
As we calculate those scores, we are going to go into the tumbling event. And the tumbling event features powerful synchronized and individual tumbling passes. Athletes may compete in one synchronized pass and in one solo pass. Passes feature a variety of salto and twisting elements and are valued for the difficulty and the connection of those skills. Awesome job to Quinnipiac for that duo pass. As you can see, that was one of the synchronized heats. And I think there may have been a fall last weekend from the Bobcats on that. So that's an awesome comeback for them on that duo pass right there.
And thank you for your patience as we calculate the scores. In the toss event, our first round, Quinnipiac scored a 9.7. Long Island scored a 8.65. The second heat, Quinnipiac scored a 8.95. That's our synchronized heat. Long Island scored a 8.4. And in our open toss, Quinnipiac scored a 9.55. Long Island scored a 8.7, bringing the event totals to Quinnipiac 28.2, Long Island 25.75. Bringing our total of the matchup so far, Quinnipiac 122.3, Long Island 113.05.
Yes, and that duo pass for Quinnipiac was going to be out of a 10.0, and the start values are going to be very different for the tumbling event, as tumbling is a little bit harder to max out these points on. So for Long Island, we are going to see a start value of an 8.35, and they're going to be coming up in just a minute. The crowd is super happy with that pass. As you can see, that was incredibly synced up. I think I saw very minor lack of synchronization, super clean tumbling.
These are very difficult skills that the athletes are executing today. So as we see a variety of athletes taking the mat for this tumbling round, it's really, there's kind of a method to the madness of where we are putting athletes in certain rounds. Coaches have a lot of decisions to make, as there's certain regulations with how many rounds that the athletes can be in for tumbling.
Absolutely. And as we go further into increasing the amount of athletes on the mat, as we go into the trio pass, you're going to see that these start values might start decreasing as it gets significantly harder to get athletes that can do the same level of difficulty, let alone doing it, but also timing it well. So right now we have the trio pass from Quinnipiac starting at a 9.55.
I will say that had beautiful synchronization throughout the entire pass.
Yeah, that is something that these teams have to practice day in and day out, is not only perfecting their own individual form and technique and all of that, but also making sure that they look identical to their fellow athletes on the mat with them. And sometimes that even will take looking at the person next to you out of the corner of your eye as you're running and looking at them in the round off. Like, it takes some definite incredible skill to get those nailed.
Right, and with these very difficult passes where, you know, someone who might not be as familiar with this sport or sports that feed into this sport, can't even imagine what goes into executing a pass like that. And to hear from Ashley that you're spending part of that pass focusing on the other people executing it just because, you know, you won't get scored on yours individually as much as you want it to be. Like, it's a group effort with these passes. It's just so impressive that these athletes are not only executing what they're executing, but they are doing it in a way that the group looks better.
Yes, 100%. And as we go into the trio pass for LIU, they're going to be starting at an 8.75. And you're going to want to be looking for acceleration in these passes along with the landings. If you look at the direction the athlete is facing when they land, if, let's say, LIU lands facing their bench, they're going to want to end with a step backwards. A controlled step is what they call it, and that is completely allowed. That is something the judges will say is okay. It's not going to be a deduction. And then the other way, if LIU lands facing Quinnipiac, they can take that controlled step forward, as they just did on that 1.5.
Yes, your step should follow the direction in which you are traveling. Just to show that continuous movement with a short step forward out of it, if you weren't traveling in that direction, might show a little bit of difficulty within the pass.
Yep, it definitely demonstrates that control aspect of the tumbling, making sure you're not letting your body just fly around wherever it is going naturally, but you're able to conceal that with that controlled step.
And you do have to determine in advance when you submit the skills that you will be doing in the meet if you will be including a step or not, because you do also have the ability to determine that you do not want to take a step that is included, which I think is something that we don't see as often, but it's definitely something that we will see occasionally depending on the athlete's tumbling experience and their preferences.
Yes. And this quad pass right here is actually going to be the last synchronized pass of the tumbling event. And for Quinnipiac, they're going to be starting at a 9.25. Great job there for the Bobcats. You may have seen in the back, the last athlete may have had a little bit low of a landing, but nothing too crazy. Still had that full controlled step forward. So I think that's going to be really good execution-wise for the Bobcats. And this is going to take us into LIU's last synchronized pass, where they are going to start out of an 8.0. And then after this, we will go into the solo tumbling, and that's where you'll really see a lot of creativity and variation throughout these passes, as these not only are these passes going to be unique to the teams, but it's unique to athletes and maybe what they have really where their strengths are, whether that's in forwards tumbling, backwards tumbling, step outs, whips. There's a lot of different variation, and this can come from the athlete's background. If they came from power tumbling, gymnastics, cheer, this really shows the different unique aspects of the backgrounds of these athletes.
the Sharks are very happy with their performance in the quad pass. Something that we'll see heading into the individual tumbling is we might see some athletes that have tumbled in these synced up passes, which is allowed, but you will not see someone doing more than one individual pass in this part of the meet. During the team routine, we might see people throw a lot of passes.
Yes.
But as of right now, this is why it's so important when these coaches are recruiting and kind of deciding who's doing what during the meets, that there's some regulations. You can't have one athlete that necessarily does every single thing for your team. So it's important to have those well-rounded athletes as well as some specialty athletes that really perform well in different events that we've seen today. There's definitely some people on all of acro teams that might just have the acro background or might be specifically recruited for tumbling, but it's very important during these meets to have that variety of players, which we will see in team event as there are 24 athletes on the mat.
Yes, absolutely. And this first pass is going to be out of a 10.0, the aerial pass. Awesome job there for Quinnipiac. She is such a super consistent athlete right there. Nails that every time I've seen her do it, I think. Super clean, tight legs together. Awesome continuation of the skills and acceleration in the pass and controlled step in the landing. I think a lot of what the judges are looking for.
Yep, that was number 5, Catherine Carter from Quinnipiac University. I believe she is a junior. She's definitely been a key player in tumbling as well as other areas for Quinnipiac over the past few years, but she really does shine in these tumbling rounds, and for very obvious reasons. As Ashley mentioned, she's super clean. She has just beautiful execution in her tumbling. It's always very exciting to watch.
For Long Island's aerial pass, we are going to be starting at an 8.60. Awesome job there for number 42. As you can see, both of those aerial passes had a forward element, so they started with a front handspring, front tuck, stepping out into the rest of their tumbling pass right there. That is something that you generally don't see as much in the synchronized tumbling or in compulsory tumbling, so that's what's pretty unique to these solo passes and what you might see a little bit more of in the team event.
It's very clean execution on that pass. And these passes are always really fun because I think those of us watching have an understanding as to why these athletes were chosen to perform certain skills. We get to see a little bit of creativity. Although there are regulations to the heat, the teams do get to pick the skill up to their discretion as long as it's qualifying.
Yes, and for the 6 element pass, we'll be starting at a 10.0 for Quinnipiac. Wow. That was a super clean pass right there for the Bobcats.
This pass has been pretty consistent from Quinnipiac so far this year. You can tell by their reactions, they're very excited on the execution of that skill. It was very powerful.
And the 6 element pass, obviously called the 6 elements, has a lot of different things going on. So you start with a running round off and then a whip back, which is a back handspring with no hands, into an Arabian step out, through to another round of back handspring 1.5. So a lot of different directions going on in that pass. I can imagine the athlete's pretty dizzy after that. But that is a very common tumbling pass that you'll see a lot in some more of these developed teams, as if you watch any other meets throughout the NCATA season. And it's also important to note This floor is not a spring floor. This is something we haven't mentioned yet, but the mat on the floor is a few inches of foam on top of the basketball floor, and there's not a lot of give. So all the power that these athletes are generating is strictly from their bodies, which really goes to show their strength. And that was Christina DiVincenzo, number 1, and she had a 9.55 start value on their 6-element pass, and you would have seen her in many other events during this meet. I know she's a huge asset for Long Island, as you can see by the execution of that pass for them.
Was very beautiful. Again, as we'll continue to mention, these elements that might be confusing to those who haven't tuned in before, the direction. We saw that the first 6-element pass from Quinnipiac came from the side of the floor. The 6-element pass from Long Island came from the corner. That does not impact your score. The corner does give a little bit more room to tumble, which depending on the pass of your choosing, you might need. The horizontal view gives another great display to all the pieces of the tumbling. So if you are very good at executing all skills of the pass, it's a great direction to choose, but there is no true score advantage or disadvantage to tumble from either the side or the corner.
Yep. And lastly, this is going to be the final solo event tumbling pass, as well as the final tumbling event or heat for this event. So we have the open pass right now from Quinnipiac starting at a 10.0. Again, this open pass is going to allow for, this has no restrictions. This can be up to the coaches and athletes' discretion of what they want to put out there. Again, no further requirements other than just executing a pass. Awesome pass right there. She seemed very excited about that, number 29. And what you just saw, that was a round-up back handspring, 1.5 step out. Something that judges really like to see is that open position when you are stepping out from that first salto, which was the 1.5. And she really exaggerated, I think, that kind of open star position going into her next round-off whip back. In a whip, no hands, or a back handspring with no hands, and then punching into a full. So that is a well-deserved 10-0 start value. That is very difficult to do. So that is a great way to end the tumbling event for Quinnipiac.
Yes, definitely beautiful execution there. And we did see Alyssa Esposito in one of the synchronized tumbling rounds, I believe the trio. So a great tumbler added to Quinnipiac's roster this year.
And for Long Island, we have the final open heat starting at an 8.75. Super clean 1.5. And that is number 4, Lila Campbell. An actual fun fact about Lila Campbell, I did gymnastics with her way back in the day. So it's super exciting getting to see a fellow athlete that I started with and, you know, the very beginning of our athletic careers, growing up and going to be an athlete in a sport that I love, and just seeing the opportunities that this sport provides.
A lot of the tumblers that we see have that gymnastics background with that beautiful technique and just very, very beautiful execution.
And now we're just waiting for these scores for the tumbling event right before we head into the team event, as these teams get in their last few touches. In the team event, the teams perform synchronized choreographed skills in a routine set to music. Each team competes up to 24 athletes. Routines are composed to showcase all skill sets that have been competed in the previous 5 events, and this event has a maximum of 110 points. So this is going to be a 2.5-minute routine. A lot is going to be going on. It is controlled chaos. You're not really going to know where to look if you have not seen a team event before, but that is what makes it so exciting, is everything that is going on. And again, it really compiles basically everything that you saw today just in 2.5 minutes.
And with the fact that you won't know where to look, don't blink because you might miss something. These skills happen very fast, and there's a lot going on all at once, and it is very, very interesting to watch and see the creativity from the teams and how they bring their energy together. We will be back with the tumbling scores after Quinnipiac does their team event today. This is going to be a very high energy event, so please enjoy watching this first team event. Great job to the Bobcats on their team routine performance. Before we discuss that a little bit further, we have some tumbling scores to share with you. In the duo pass, Quinnipiac scored a 8.95. Long Island scored a 7.9. In the trio pass, Quinnipiac scored a 8.9. Long Island scored a 7.6. The quad pass, Quinnipiac scored a 7.8. Long Island scored a 7.0. Heading into the individual passes, on the aerial pass, Quinnipiac scored a 9.875. Long Island scored a 8.225. In the sixth element pass, Quinnipiac scored a 9.825. Long Island scored a 9.025. And in the open pass, Quinnipiac scored a 9.5. Long Island scored a 8.45, bringing the event totals for the tumbling event. Quinnipiac 54.85, Long Island a 48.2. Heading into the team event, prior to team event scores, Quinnipiac is sitting at a 177.15. Long Island is sitting at a 161.25.
Yeah, we just saw Quinnipiac take the floor for their team event, and overall I thought they did a really good job out there. We had a few mishaps just in that acro sequence. We had one top come down to the floor, and then just a little bit lack of stability in another one of those groups. Both groups were really fighting, though. I have to give it to them. Those did not look easy to get back up in the air and to stay there. So that is something that this sport really requires, is for you to bounce back when things don't go the way that you planned. And the 2 minutes and 45 seconds that team event is, a lot can go wrong, and it's up to you to limit what can go wrong. So overall, I think that was a great recovery for Quinnipiac. I don't think that is going to do too much damage at all for that score for them. Overall, yeah, they did really well. So we're going to go into Long Island's team event. Also, the start value for Quinnipiac's team event was a 105.3. And for Long Island, their start value is going to be a 99.22. And the team event typically takes a little bit longer to score from these judges, so there might be a little bit longer of a wait.
As you saw with the 24 athletes on the mat, there's a lot happening in a lot of different areas and different sequences possibly going at the same time. So in advance of the event, of all events, in advance of the meet, the teams submit what skills they plan on doing, which helps our judges to score a little bit more accurately, knowing what to expect. And that also helps them to know if something was not executed as the way it was intended, which we can usually get a good gauge of that because there's mostly multiple groups doing the same skills at once. But for example, if a tumbling pass maybe didn't go the way it was intended, you didn't know what the original pass was supposed to be, the judges do have that file in advance and know what to expect with the team events that take the mat.
And you'll definitely see a lot of variation between these two teams. There is no particular order that you have to do the different skills in team events. So I believe Quinnipiac started with some standing tumbling and then some tosses. They did their one of their pyramids at the end, some other pyramids in the middle. There is no requirement of the order of skills. So we will definitely see different structure from LIU, I will imagine. But yeah, it should just be a few more minutes until they take the floor.
And this is truly something that is very difficult to do, putting together a team routine, as there are certain regulations with blocking and being able to see the skills, especially as our judges have a lot to watch. They want to be able to ensure that they can fully see the skills that are being performed. So as we saw, like, some creative formations with what we were doing for different tumbling passes, definitely a lot of time and effort goes into mapping out team routines and a huge shout out to all the coaches that are able to do that. It is such a skill and something that I can't fathom, and something that they have to redo every year as they create their new team routines. So good job, coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're wondering how these judges manage to judge this whole event, there are 3 judges, and each of them take 3 panels of the floor, and they focus on that, and then they kind of come together to figure out what they all saw. All right, LIU is taking the mat for their team event, so we will see you in 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
Great team routine from Long Island University. Jam-packed once again with a lot of skills.
Yes, I think we may have seen just a few mishaps here and there, just some bobbles, but I think they've really kept it together for the most part. It's really easy to have some falls or any wobbles get in your head, but these athletes have to continue the rest of their routine to get that done. So now we have an exhibition out here from a local acrobatics and tumbling program,
which is really, really exciting to see, as we mentioned, just the growth of the sport. So exciting.
And just to note, acrobatics and tumbling is still an emerging NCAA sport. So beginning in August of 2020, NCAA Division II and III institutions began playing under NCAA rules. And NCAA Division I has a different legislative process and was impacted by COVID-19. And so once there are 40 institutions with the sport, acrobatics and tumbling will be eligible to be an NCAA championship sport. So it's super exciting to see these youth programs starting to build. You're seeing them a lot up and coming all around the country, really starting to prepare young women into going into this collegiate athlete experience.
And as we can see from the performance right now, is there's a lot of very diverse athletes that are becoming so well-rounded in all areas of the sport, like acro and tumbling. A lot of these athletes are doing all the aspects of the team routine that we just saw. Just, again, so exciting for the future of the sport.
And I know as someone coming from a background of gymnastics, I can't speak for every gymnast out there that has gone into acrobatics and tumbling, but I do know that kind of having this sport as a new opportunity was such a breath of fresh air for doing gymnastics all of my life. So I think it's a really great opportunity for girls if they're looking for a change or something else to excel in. Really helps you find a new love for a sport that maybe you haven't seen in a while. And I know that's different for everyone. It can be different from cheer or wherever you're coming from. But it's definitely a super awesome experience that I think if you're interested at all, definitely go onto the NCAA or NCATA website, see what's out there, see what's near you, and maybe fill out some recruiting questionnaires or go to many camps that these schools are providing. Learn as much as you can, talk to coaches. It's definitely something you don't want to miss out on. And it'll just be a few more minutes for these scores, most likely.
Before we get the final scores of the day, this was a very exciting meet with two teams from the Northeast. Long Island University coming into their second year, Quinnipiac entering,
I don't even know.
I was going to say whatever year it is now,
year.
as being a founding school in the sport. In the community that we get to see at these events. Speaking from personal knowledge, assistant coach for Long Island University, Nicolette Tianga, is actually an alum of Quinnipiac University. She's from Long Island. She was hired coming out of her graduation from Quinnipiac University. So bringing some of that knowledge that she gained from Quinnipiac to her team, and while this is a very competitive sport, it is so refreshing to see the teams on the side like wanting to see each other succeed. It's no fun if you're going up against a team that is having a lot of struggles. You want to have that tough competition. So this was a very exciting matchup today between Long Island University and Quinnipiac University. And I'll mention it again, so excited to see more schools popping up in the Northeast area. We have Iona, which Ashley got to attend their meet last weekend. So it's just great for athletes in this area to have those opportunities, and that's why we'll start seeing more local programs popping up at the youth and high school level.
Yes, absolutely. And I think also with this sport creating opportunities for women for athletic careers in college, it's also creating a lot of coaching opportunities. I know that I believe both assistant coaches at Quinnipiac were on Quinnipiac's team, just recent grads as well.
That is correct.
So they are finding, career paths through this sport as well. I know it's something I've considered as well. And like Nicolette, Shelby's coming from University of Oregon as an athlete there, and I know plenty of teammates that have gone into this career coaching as well, as it's just paving the path for more women to come and empowerment through what the NCATA is.
And as you might have noticed today from our coaches attending wearing pink, this is the breast cancer awareness meet for Long Island University. As the teams warmed up, they sported their very best pink and matching pink shirts from LIU. Just great cause. They have some donations going out to some organizations that are helping with breast cancer research and support of those battling cancer. So 2 teams coming together for a great meet and for a great cause. These athletes are very present in their communities. We always say they're student athletes. They're achieving those high GPAs in the classroom. They're clearly incredible athletes. But something that a lot of people might not know, expectations of athletes of this caliber, is there's a lot of presence in the community, doing community service, helping with events at your universities and in your local community. So with the amount of training that goes into competing at the level that's we see today, there's so much more that goes into being a student athlete.
Yes, 100%. So we have the final scores for the meet. We just have to calculate those really quick.
The team routine total for Long Island University was a 58.92, with their total final score from today being a 220.17. And Quinnipiac's team routine score came in at a 80.45, with their total meet final score being a 257.6. So your final scores for today: winning the matchup, Quinnipiac University 257.6, Long Island University falling a little bit short at 220.17.
Overall, some great competition today. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this NCATA matchup, and we hope you want to follow more in the future. So have a great night, and
Thanks for joining us.